Hey there everyone, so today I have kind of an interesting one coming at ya. Bring Me the Horizon, Sempiternal, I think that's how you pronounce it anyway. As I'm sure you all know, Bring Me the Horizon are a metalcore band from the UK, and in their 9 years they have really kind of divided a lot of people's opinions, caused controversy, and just quite honestly rustled some jimmies. They have also had one of the most interesting career trajectories for a metalcore band, at least in my opinion. To begin with, in 2006 they released Count Your Blessings, their debut, which was largely received negatively. It got the kind of hate train rolling for the band, and to be honest I can't exactly blame all the haters, because this album was just kind of very cookie cutter, generic, breakdownian riffing. They really didn't impress a huge amount of people. However, this sound, along with their image, has pretty much spearheaded an entire generation of people. I suppose you could call them scene kids, call them what you want, but that's not the point. You know exactly who I'm talking about, I should suspect. As a direct result of this, the band got a ton more hate due to their fan base and their image, which, although it was unfair, I didn't feel like their music was anything special. It was, again, just pretty generic deathcore, quite honestly. 2 years later though, Suicide Season dropped, and this album was certainly a change in direction for the band to a certain degree at least. Not massively, but definitely a change. Honestly, I really liked this record. It was kind of generic still, but it was, I felt, well written metalcore. I didn't love it, but it did prove they were willing to try different things with the electronic elements in this album, the more sort of anthemic, chorusy type bits and stuff like that as well. But with this album, they pretty much completely dropped all death metal influence. There were no blast beats, no super fast riffing, or like, you know, super speedy picking or tremolo picking or anything like that. However, I will say the album that really sort of grabbed people's attentions was their latest one, the third album, which is There Is a Hell, Believe Me I've Seen It, There Is a Heaven, Let's Keep It a Secret. On this record, a lot changed for sure. It was a lot more atmospheric at certain moments, more anthemic. That was sort of the main thing I felt. It had a lot more choruses in it. It was a bit more varied too, with songs like Don't Go and Blessed with a Curse, where strings and sort of clean female sung vocals were involved. Also, again, there were more synths coming into the mix too. I personally love this record. I maintain that it's one of the best in the genre, and they really proved yet again they were willing to sort of experiment, change and contort their sound into something totally new. Tracks like Crucify Me, It Never Ends, Fuck and Visions were certainly not as experimental as, say, Converge or Dillinger, to name drop another metalcore band, but it certainly threatened to go somewhere. And also, to be fair, amongst most of the metalcore sea of bands, they really did stick out with this album, at least for me. So anyway, here we are in 2013, and Sempiternal has actually dropped, or more specifically leaked, and thus available for stream as well. To be honest, before I get straight into the album, the first alarm bells started ringing when I heard Shadow Moses as a single. The loss of guitarist Jonah really did show the guitar tone was thicker to kind of make up for the fact there was only one guitarist, but I wouldn't say it necessarily worked. The synths gave it a more melodic feel, but it sounded empty and there was way too much of a breakdowny metalcore, generic deathcore kind of feel for me. The chorus was very There Is a Hell, but it didn't necessarily feel as anthemic or, you know, epic or anything like that. It sort of reminded me of a Worse While She Sleeps. They kind of tried to mix heaviness and melody within the metalcore circle in the same sort of way, but I just didn't feel it was as good, as well written or anything like that. Plus I felt like everything on There Is a Hell was way more layered and textured than this was. Having said that, with time it did grow on me and I don't mind it. It's very alright, I guess. But despite that, after 30 seconds into the first track on the new album Sempiternal, it's called Can You Feel My Heart, pretty much all of those worries were washed away. This is a pretty drastic change in direction for the band. They're not going from metalcore to drum and bass by any means. They're still a metalcore band, but it's definitely got a lot more influence from other genres this time round. The synths, melodic guitars in this song, and the very dynamic playing certainly give it a totally different flavour. It kind of reminded me to a degree of post-rock and post-metal as well. Very multi-layered, very climactic, and at moments just it really felt larger than life and almost jaw-dropping in a sense. My only complaint about this track would be the production, and to be honest this is kind of a running issue with their previous albums and also this album. I feel like a lot of the heavier moments kind of lose a lot of bite because of it being so overproduced, so clean. There's no grit, there's no real anything left to really dig into or get absorbed in. It's just so clean and so polished that it kind of loses all of that. However, I will say that I feel like it's well constructed and interesting enough to hold, you know, my interest and concentration. I do just want to touch down on the overproduction a little bit because I do feel like it's the biggest problem this record really has. For example, it's pretty emphasised on tracks like, as I said before, Shadow Moses, House of Wolves and Antivist. I'd probably say the opening riff to House of Wolves is the biggest example. It opens with a kind of fairly average riff in fairness, but it just sounds so flat because of the production. It has absolutely no bite to it whatsoever, and it's just kind of flat as a result. And to be fair, it's not actually that bad a song, especially after this riff. I'd actually say I quite enjoy it. The chorus is pretty huge and anthemic as well on this track, but I just feel like the production really lets it down, especially on the riffs and breakdowns. Despite that complaint though, a lot of this record remains engaging and uplifting thanks to so many anthemic moments in nearly every single track. Some seriously notable ones are the opener, once again, Empire Let Them Sing, which has a ferocious opening breakdown, has these really sort of ethereal synths in the background, and it really reminds me of Deftones to a certain degree. But back to what I was saying, the chorus is just freaking massive on this song. And it's just such a great chorus, to be honest. Another one would be Sleepwalking. It's a bit more traditional sounding when it comes to metalcore, but once again, the chorus is just massive. But I will say this one is a tiny bit whiny and fragile, I feel. Regardless, it's still massive. Back to highlights on this record, though. A massive one for me is And Snakes Start to Sing, which has probably the biggest post-rock influence. It opens very calmly, sporting clean-sung vocals from Ollie, which he actually performs very well, which kind of surprised me. A lot of people associate him with just screaming, kind of like, you know, a drowned cat. A lot of people really don't like his voice. I personally kind of do. But regardless, he, for the first time on this record, sings. He does it on quite a few other tracks as well, but in particular, I feel like he really nailed them on this one. But either way, tons of added guitar bits come in and sort of really like soaked in reverb as well to quite kind of give off a very atmospheric vibe. As it moves along, the song builds very well. There's plenty of nice textures and layers kind of flying in all directions throughout the song. Some pretty interesting and awesome drumming as well on this track, and very well placed background guitar with tons of reverb like I already mentioned. And like I said, it gives it an atmosphere, and I'd say it gives it a sort of very surreal, soundscape, dreamy kind of feel. As I was saying about the heavier moments on this album, I think Antivist pretty much emphasises exactly what I'm talking about. It is very much traditional Bring Me The Horizon, very breakdowny and quiet, honestly plain and pretty average. With the fact that this album is kind of overproduced, it just doesn't have any bite. Again, it doesn't feel aggressive, it doesn't feel blood pumping or adrenaline inducing. It just pretty much loses all its bite. And I think what really puts the nail in the coffin on this one is the fact that the lyrics are just straight up awful. They're so unbelievably bad. Just go listen to it and you'll see my point pretty much straight away. I also will say that certain moments the vocal pattern doesn't necessarily fit the rhythm of the instrumentals all that well either, which doesn't really help its case. For my money, it's by far the worst track on the album. And speaking of worst best tracks, to close the record is Hospital for Souls, and for my money, once again, it's pretty much the best song on the album. It pretty much sums up the album. It's very layered, very textured, it has lots of really interesting sounds coming from synths, guitars, tons of reverb and effects and all that sort of lovely stuff. Again, it sports a very post-rock and sort of post-metal flavour with some pretty epic building climaxes, some kind of spacious, quieter moments. It has a very good atmosphere about it, and also the ending of this song is pretty much the only time on this album that I would actually describe it as even remotely noisy or thick or dense or anything like that. To sum it up, I must admit I really enjoyed Sempiternal, and I think Bring Me The Horizon sort of maintain their status of one of the more interesting metalcore bands around. I do feel they have a lot of learning to do, mainly with the production and also the riffing to a certain degree. Seriously, those riffs need to sharpen up on them. And also a couple less breakdowns would be kind of nice, to be honest, because it gets weary even though you bring in so much other stuff. I will also say perhaps this album could have been a bit more varied, especially during the louder moments. They're all kind of the same sort of idea, same structure, same vocal pattern on a lot of them as well. But again, having said that, they have taken an interesting turn, and I always praise them for, you know, or any band for that matter, for experimenting, for changing. I will say, just before I give my score and final thoughts, that I don't understand why everyone sees this as the second coming of Christ. It is a really good album, but a lot of people seem to have gone overboard, in my opinion. A lot of people have kind of creamed their pants over this one. I mean, it's good, each to their own and all that, but not for me. I must admit, I still prefer There Is a Hell, personally at least. Anyway, for their kind of interesting collaboration of post-rock, post-metal and metalcore, I do think this album is deserving of a lot of praise, and also I do think it's deserving a 7.5 out of 10. I think Bring Me The Horizon will continue along this path of maturing and kind of changing up their sound incorporating other instruments, other ideas into it as well. I think Bring Me the Horizon will continue to get a lot of hate. They'll continue to cause controversy and whatnot. Whether it's for the right reasons or not that they get the hate, well, that's another matter altogether, and I can't really bother to discuss it right now. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this album for sure. I really would like to hear other people's opinions on this one, especially it's been so discussed over the last pretty much couple of weeks, really. And I'll catch you guys and gals later.